Welcome, everybody. My name is Calvin Willer. I'm director at Gainsborough's house. It's so nice to see you all. And we've gathered here today to celebrate this man, Humphrey Ocean, our great artist, whose exhibition I'm sure you've all seen. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll be enjoying it after the event today. Humphrey and I are going to be in conversation in a moment, but before that is a real treat because we have a film to show you. And it's a film by Rafi Chipperfield. There's a version of it downstairs, but this is a slightly extended version, I believe, of the film. Maybe kind of director's cut. I don't know. We're about to see. But Humphrey, you're going to say a few words about Rafi and about the film before we do the showing. So, Humphrey, over to you.
Thank you very much. There we go, Eddie. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just recovering from we are gathered here today. What? Yeah, sent shivers down my throat. This is so lovely to meet my public, as I don't see your public, but it's I always think there's going to be one person, and you know, as I said, I only go on as long as I don't outnumber the audience. Anyway, we're just going to show first of all, as an introduction, the version Raphael Chipperfield, I get it wrong now because I know as Rafi. I've known him for a long time, very lucky, has made a little film that I am in. It's not about me, and that's crucial. And the version that is on a loop, that is showing in the lobby of the exhibition, is, I think that's a more extended one. This, I think, is perhaps slightly shorter, all the same length. But this was the very first cut that I saw that Rafi showed me, and I kind of fell in love with it. And it has a couple of things in it that we were a bit nervous about. It's got clips of things that we thought might involve litigation, but apparently it's not going to. Nothing to do with language. It's borrowing. P. Diddy samples of the Stingray. And apparently has to pay him $2,000 a day until the end of, 70 years after Steen dies, because he didn't ask permission. But anyway, it's slightly different in a shot than the one downstairs. I have to say that I've never wanted a film made about me, and this is not about me. I love Rafi's films. One in particular that I think about almost every day called Smile With Your Eyes, about a delivery man. You'll see his, it is slightly different from that. I am in a Rafi film. There you go. I wrote recently in a book that I'm doing of drawings that I made in Africa when I used to go and see my sister. And I wrote one of the things about now I find travelling, going anywhere, is that people do exactly the same thing. And I like that, but just in a different accent. And it's quite interesting just driving around here, it's a whole world. It was one of the things I like about Jane Austen is that she sat in one place. And all of life came through her sitting room, as it were. And, she created a world. There's a school of bird watching actually that is, if you stay in one place, you'll see everything. The Twitcher's idea of getting into your Mondeo, driving 250 miles to see a spur-winged plover. If you wait long enough, it will come. These houses here, these horizontal windows sort of trickled down through town planning until they'd kind of windows became horizontal rather than portrait. Windows originally in castles were arrow slits, and so they were like this for a long time, and eventually they realised, hold on, you can make a window parallel to the landscape that you're looking at. So those are very much, as it were, within, probably built with, you know, within the early part of my lifetime. But it's funny, just driving around, you know, today makes me look at it slightly differently even now. This is what we've been driving through, isn't it? And I'm quite pleased about that, you know. It has no claims, you know. It's not new Rembrandt or Jeff Koons or, you know. It's just it. And this is a, God knows what, it's a roadhouse in a dire state of neglect. And look, in this car park, the building blocks of modern life, or of life in general. Angel of the South, some wings, a balloon which was filled with air, and that's what we are. Grew, just picked it up. It's perfect. So, you know what? And then this, which holds stuff together, friction, which apparently keeps us on this earth. Otherwise, we all fly away. So it's part of gravity. It's big stuff, you know. Here, it's all free. Can I take this? This is. Hello.
Oh, just to say that Mr. Fox, the tree man, came.
And we're just going past Fox Hill. That's wonderful.
Oh, he told Mr. Fox.
Yeah.
He likes the tree more than we do and wants to do the minimum, really.
Oh, no.
But anyway, of course, he didn't give a prize today because...
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot for phoning.
Okay.
Oh, dear, bye. That's fine. I've noticed this happens sometimes when I freeze the television, and I just because, you know, there's a delay or I want to go and make a cup of tea. And then I come back and I find that the picture, the still picture, is very beautiful. And I spend some time looking at it and seeing how it's constructed. And of course it's not constructed, it's random. And I did it once in when I was watching North by Northwest, when the drunken Cary Grant, yeah, he's very, very drunk, and he's about to go into this bicycle, and of course we're all very tense, and I just stopped it at that moment because I needed to just pop out of the room. And you know, it was frozen, and you know that the accident would never happen. In fact, it didn't happen. But here we are, just looking out, and this is the way that I begin to kind of assimilate things. This very beautiful view to the right here, which talk about the hand of mankind, the crazy paving, the picket fence, the trellis that's making do and getting by. As a friend of mine says, for some reason it's cordoning something off. The double glazing windows, which just shows how vulnerable a house is. Everything about this is what somebody has thought of at one stage. I'd rather agree with James Joyce, who said there's no such thing as an uninteresting person. I think there's no such thing as an uninteresting building. You'll never believe where we are. We're in one of the greatest car parks in South London. It's got a child's aeroplane in it. It's got a dirty old end of a balloon. It's got a skip. But the view is a catalogue of the last 150 years of human civilization. Anyway, can I help? These They're really, what they are is they're the kind of in-between moments. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to make it like they're things that I've seen, but they don't really warrant taking much further. The sort of the most boring things in the world, I thought, I'm not going to be put off by something being very dull. Sort of can be long periods between light bulb moments, when you think, yes, I've got to do that. Car windscreen. What would you do with it? Draw it. You're Romanian. There's his hat. He was doing the car wash. And that. Look at that. That was what I saw on the side of a derelict van. I know that had been parked in front of somebody's house. It's the moments in between, when you're fired up and there is an urgency, that's one thing. But the bits in between, those have been going on probably since my life as I know it now began, which was when I was about 52 or 53. The first half of my life had been, as it were, for me, a kind of rehearsal. And I began to get going a bit. Things about painting, it takes a long time. For me, anyway. We may have to rewind actually, because there's it's not derelict at all. It's a working boozer, and as I say, there are actual people having pint. It's just that this isn't. This is a benign area, but it's. I think this is a more suitable place for me to have washed up. Because it's in between and it's benign, really, rather like my paintings. Like the great thing now is to say something, and I falling all around our shoulders. Although I probably talk quite a lot, really I want to just keep quiet. Wet with the virtue and precision, it helped to have corrected vision. The hours of the money's gone. What could have been?
Very fine backdrop, as ever, here at Gainsborough's house. So Humphrey, welcome again. It's a great honour to be here talking to you today. Obviously, we've got to know each other over the last, I guess, not quite a year, almost a year, when I came to see you in your studio. And here we have this marvellous exhibition here now. A few words of introduction. You don't really need much of an introduction to many of you, I'm sure. But if shall I just keep going? So bear with me. Yeah, just a few little sort of pointers to your biography. Sounds a bit grand, but just a few sort of pointers that then might lead into conversation. So Humphrey, you live and work in South London. I'm sure that will come up in some of my questions. Originally from Sussex, you went to art schools in Tunbridge Wells, Brighton, and Canterbury. Do stop me if I'm making this up.
No.
And then there's obviously a sort of musical element to your life story, which again we may touch on, because in the 1970s and 80s you played in a band.
70s. Yeah.
70s. With Ian Dury, I understand. And again, that might come up in conversation with Kilburn and the High Roads. So music has been a sort of theme there. And you also created some art album cover for Paul McCartney. I imagine the 80s. Was it 80s or early 90s?
70s.
70s.
Again,
wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been downhill ever since. Well, it seems to have all happened in the 70s.
Well,
but,
there we go.
Oh, since you mentioned album covers, I did one for 10cc before that. And it was done by an organisation called Hypnosis, who one or two people might kind of know of, but they started doing Pink Floyd album covers and then became this sort of like mini industry in Tin Pan Alley in Denmark Street. And I credit them with changing the way that we saw sort of mediated imagery. I don't know if anyone in here is old enough to remember the Benson and Hedges advert, where there'd just be a colour on the side of and suddenly we were being treated intelligently, rather than, if you smoke 10 Benson and Hedges, you will get the girl or the man. They moved on. And it was Hypnosis, I think, their influence. Dark Side of the Moon, the Pink Floyd, probably one or two of you might remember. Anyway, sorry, I'm interrupting.
So music is going to come up in the questions. I suspect the first time I came across your work was at Dulwich Picture Gallery, knowing the exhibition that you did there, which was in the sort of early 2000s, wasn't it? Yeah. Maybe 2002, 3, that sort of time.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been aware of your work since that moment, and obviously Dulwich is on your patch.
It's my local art gallery
in South London.
I was artist in residence there and did a show called How's My Driving? Yeah.
I'm not going to ask that question. That's not there.
Nor is that a question, by the way. When you see How's My Drive, they don't want to know. I think they make a Christmas card out of the phone calls when people ring up and give their opinion. Anyway,
when up to 2003, I'm going to have to keep an eye on the clock here. 2004, you were elected a Royal Academician, and Royal Academy certainly will pick up on. And you served for, I think, a decade as Professor Perspective, which, not now. Later, we'd like to pick up on exactly what Professor of Perspective does. But I seem to remember a certain J.M.W. Turner may have held that position in the distant, a little bit before you, wasn't your immediate predecessor. And then National Portrait Gallery came along in 2012. Was it Handbook of Modern Life? Mm-hmm. Again, a significant moment, I would say, in your work, your profile, and getting us to where we are today. And then it would be amiss of me not to mention a certain painting from 2013. Maybe it's from 2013. Lord Volvo and his estate.
1982, but close.
But it was voted in 2013.
Oh yeah, it was
as
Billboard,
one of the nation's favourite paintings.
Yeah,
that's what we're getting to. Yeah. One of the nation's favourite paintings. That's quite an honour.
That I'm not going to interrupt.
There we go. Hold that. I think our work is done, I think. And now, of course, at Gainsborough's house, and it's been fantastic to work with you, Humphrey, and we've put this exhibition together here. Beautiful publication that, in a limited edition, for those who haven't yet got a copy, please do pick up a copy. Fantastic essay by Darian Leader, and it's a lovely, lovely thing. But I think I'd like to start by thinking about that time I came to see you in your studio in South London. Is it remind me? Not Tulse Hill.
West Norwood.
West Norwood.
Yeah.
West Norwood. And I think what will be interesting for us all to hear is something about your studio practice and your kind of day-to-day routine. Can you tell us? I mean, you could describe the space better than I could. And what is your daily routine like?
Yeah, this is lovely. Just to show you how unprepared this talk is, I don't really have a routine, but so that's news to me. So I'd better think of something pretty quickly. I do get in between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, and I go home by about 7.
Perfect. And next question. Great. That's enough. No, I think it's. I mean, for art. To say it's a routine, but give us some sense of what Humphrey does in this lovely, lovely studio space.
Well, I mean, if painting is a funny thing. The reason I kind of deny routine is because painting is an extraordinary thing, as anyone who's done it is to be involved in. I mean, there are times when one really is sort of wrestling with a tiger, and it's probably those times when I ring up and say, well, I won't be home at 7, I'll be home in an hour, and then I get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever, because I'm battling with something. But on the whole, for instance, at the moment, I'm doing one of my fairly rare long-winded portraits, and I come in the morning. I've done probably about 7 or 8 of my gouache, what I call my 1 hour, the Handbook of Modern Life series of paintings. I do those and leave them lying around. And then one of them will begin to emerge, and I'll think I'm drawn towards that one. That's the one I'm going to make a version of. And that's what I've been doing. I can only really remember what I've been doing in the last 2 weeks, and that is really what I'm sort of deeply involved in at the moment. I paint and I draw. That's what I do. I don't make films. I simply can't do anything else. I mean, I am chronically unemployable, which is one of the things. I've always been an artist without even knowing that I was going to be. The first moment that I realised was when I went to Tunbridge Wells Art School, left school at 16. I have a school friend here in the audience. So I left school a bit early, and I met this boy who was a little bit older than me, and we'd stay up all night drawing in these black bushy books and listening to Bob Dylan or whatever it was, and drinking cups of tea and drawing. And I wanted to sort of be like him. I recognised in him something, obsession. And at that moment, it sort of decided me that, because I'd always thought, well, I'm going to have to get a proper job, when I'm 18 or whatever, get a doctor law, whatever it is. My ambition was to delay getting the proper job, but it was quite easy to delay it because nobody wanted to employ me anyway. So that was the help. Sorry, though.
Well, painting. So was it always going to be painting? You make sculpture as well, but for you, was it? How did it become painting?
It's just sort of life in art, really. I mean, I carried on. I did get over the big one that Darian in his essay talks about. Well, I talked to him about it. I said that art begins at 7. Children's art that we have on our fridges and what have you. It's not art. It's like nature. It's so beautiful you can't criticize it. But at the Jesuitical age of 7 is when you first really become self-conscious and embarrassed. And if you can plough through that and keep drawing and painting, and you realise how bad you are. So you've got to be you've got to have the hide of a rhino and the sensitivity of a butterfly, basically, to be an artist. And if you can get over that age of 7 and carry on, then you might be. Very few people do it.
But it was always painting.
Yes, I mean, sculpture was a sort of painting was a hobby that got out of hand for me. But sculpture was a hobby within a hobby, as it were. And I only started that because Miranda and I go to Corsica every year. So we have done for about the last 20 years on and off. And the churches there have extraordinary, sometimes slightly primitive, but very, very beautiful sculptures. And there was a particular model of a boat in there that got me as a sort of votive offering, made in the 1930s. Sorry, I was... Yeah.
And what about place? So South London or London? Clearly at Gainsborough's house, where we're situated, obviously the birthplace of Thomas Gainsborough, and that sense of place is really important. But it seems to me that place is important to you too. What is it about South London that is important to you?
That's accidental. It's not so much that none of this I thought about, as it were, when I was starting out. But I now recognise local art is what I'm most drawn to. I mean, from Rothko, for instance, that Miranda, who's here today, I'm probably going to slightly misquote her. She says that the Rothko streets of New York in sacks of blood. Am I wrong, Miranda? Is that? No, but in a way, it's the sort of living. They're not streets, but somehow walking along streets that are like that inform those squares. Warhol, who we just loved, I still love. He spent a day mixing up 2 colours. I mean, the colour is just the most important thing, but his colours are very, very intelligent. And he became an artist because he was when he was he was at home ill when he was 13, had to spend a year with his mum, and that's a really important thing for an artist, to be sort of taken away from school. It's happened in quite a number of instances, and she fed him on Campbell's chicken soup. So those tins of soup, it's not just a graphic image, they're actually kind of running through his veins. That's local. The electric chair, which is a hideous image, which he made very beautiful. He made you look at it and made you think about it. Now, I couldn't do that because we don't have electric chairs, luckily, in England. But he is legitimate and has done it, and it persists in reminding us what they get up to in America. Are there any Americans in the audience? By the way, I love Americans, by the way. It has nothing to do with that. Right. I landed in South London by accident. When I was in this little group, our manager, Gordon, rang me up, and the line wasn't very good. And he said, I've got a flat for you. So he said, I said, oh, Kensington, that'll do. I didn't know, that it was particularly posh, but I knew it because I was brought up in the country. I used to come up to, he said, no, sunshine, Kennington, which is south of the river, and it's been a kind of rake's progress ever since. And it would happen wherever I landed, is I just think, well, I've just got to get on with it now. Basic rudiment of art, don't complain, make another one. And that's really all I do. So I've, even though I should be living in a castle in Malibu, I've lived on Peckham Rye. We live on Peckham Rye. It's just become, it's where it's the clay that I stand on, that I if I'm going to understand any part of the world, I understand that. And I sort of, as I think I sort of mentioned in the film, when I go to foreign places, which is always exciting and what have you, I think they are, they're connected here. I won't understand what makes them laugh or why they do this. It's exotic, but I recognize where I am. Yeah. So so it's become something for me just because I've been living there for 50 years.
We're going to come back to that because I think for me it's something about the urban fabric of South London that I think has entered into your work. But we're going to come back to that because what I want to ask you now is about the Royal Academy. And we were talking just before this event where you asked me about Thomas Gainsborough's relationship with the Royal Academy, which had ups and downs, shall we say. But I want you to tell us, the role of the Royal Academy in your life and how it's impacted on you.
It's a lovely thing to be part of. I mean, it's a corpus of disparate intelligences, and we somehow get on with each other. We disagree with each other, often intensely. But if anyone attacks us, we link arms. It's what the Sopranos call family, I can't deny it's helped. It's helped me. I've been in it now for 22 years. I have an absurd sense of public duty. So for the first 10 years, I did a lot of sitting on committee. I never sat on a committee in my life. And the other thing is, it's an institution. And those of us who've never had a job, as it were, to encounter something called line management is almost alien. And but you kind of discover, it's not okay. The big one is that it is the only institution in the world, I think, that is run by artists. We pretend it is. I mean, we have there's 80 of us, under 75. I will become a senior next year. But after 75, you don't have to sit on committees. You can still do things. It's great. You carry on. So it's not like being a politician. You don't have to kiss babies and keep. You can. We've got 103. We've got 105-year-olds, like a girl, Diana Armfield, running about the place. And if they, with their experience, you can draw on that. I mean, we know what happens to politicians, what happens in government. It's the moment somebody gets going, they're out because they've been discovered doing something, or they're just out. And that always seems an awful pity, especially if they're responsible for something. They should carry on being responsible. Most art institutions are run not by artists, but have, as it were, might have a token artist on as the trustees. The other thing about the Royal Academy is that we can put on anything. The Tate can't. They have to put on post 1900 or whatever. The National Gallery have to put pre-1900. Well, the nearest thing we are to us, I think, is the V&A, which I think of as like the human brain. It works. That has no boundaries.
I mean, I think it's a remarkable thing. Many of you will know that Gainsborough's house has a very fine relationship with the Royal Academy. Your president, Rebecca Salter, is in fact our honorary president, and we have this lovely kind of connection going, obviously, all the way back to Thomas Gainsborough. I mean, obviously, having your exhibition here last year, we had Catherine Jones, another Royal Academician here. So that's a really nice kind of link that we like to cultivate. But can you tell us more about this professorship? Because I'm fascinated by the professorship of perspective.
Just before,
We'll hold that one. Yeah, no.
No, I'm going to just say, you said it was very nice to have it. To me, it's a great honour to show in Gainsborough's house, and this is, again, to talk about connecting with the ground that you're standing on. This is where Gainsborough started. And I'm always fascinated by where things start. We take so many things for granted. But for instance, I live in a Victorian house. It's got a bay window. It's standard, there's millions of them. There must have been one somewhere that was first made. Somebody saw it, thought, well, that's nice, that's good. We'll copy that. And then somebody else saw it. And then it said, okay. This is where Gainsborough began, and he became a great portrait painter. Now, he was early doors with the Royal Academy, which was set up in 1768 by Reynolds and Gainsborough. My goodness, they had a pretty good team. They, over the next sort of 50 years, Constable, reluctantly, Stubbs, who was one of my great favourites, Turner, who was Professor of Perspective for 30 years. I was Professor of Perspective for 12 years, but actually most professors are there for about 2 years, but I wanted to do 30 years. Actually, by the time I'd done my whatever it was, 12, 8, I can't remember now how long it was, 12 till 20. You do the math. Anyway, I'd sort of had enough and handed over to Fiona Banner. But Tracy Emin said to me, she said, oh, it's a philosophical post. And I said, yeah, that's true. It's not, when one thinks of perspective, one thinks of sort of paintings of streets with houses getting smaller. But my definition of perspective is things become less interesting to one the further away they are. And that's brought home horribly by awful news that we hear all over the world, which is hideous, which brings it a bit closer, but somehow we survive those terrible events because they are at a distance. And if they happened here, if a bomb went off, it would be different. You can't help it. If what happens in your locality, again, one's purlieu, as it were, that to me is perspective. And also, although the brain is an extraordinary thing, and the reach it has, it's only a certain size. You can only keep certain things, a certain amount of things, as it were, bubbling along. And it's one of the things that I rather like about the fact that everyone says, oh, we should learn from history, but their mistakes, we shouldn't repeat. No, they were their mistakes. We have to make mistakes of our own to learn from them. And they're never in this, they're a different context. Sorry, I'm sorry, have I still...
No, I think this is
it's
this is the answer I was hoping for.
Perspective is that's what perspective is. Anyway,
yeah, it's
at the long view, and to be able to see that something actually, that's maybe not a priority. This is a priority.
I love Tracy's perspective, that it's philosophical. I mean, to me, it's also a kind of, it's a bit of a reality checkpoint role. That actually you can look at, this perspective for things. So I kind of like that. Is there a teaching role in it? Were you doing lectures and seminars to
there
students?
Too much. I think they allowed me in once a year to do a little a talk and
a sort of annual lecture or
something like that. And then I'd probably bring in some sort of an anatomical drawing of a car, the kind that you get with, in the sort of Haynes manuals, and I put those next to a Stubbs anatomical. Don't get me started on Stubbs, for we'll be here till 4:00 in the morning. I just try to sort of make connections and start the ball rolling. Yeah, no, but I didn't go. They didn't want me in there every week or.
So, but thinking about teaching, I want to take you back to Canterbury momentarily. That's where you met Ian Dury, and he was teaching on the course there.
Absolutely. He was my...
Talk to us a little bit about that time and what role he played at that early stage.
Well, he came... He'd been teaching in Luton. He'd been at the Royal College of Art. He was a painter, just a painter. Just a painter. He was a painter when I met him. He started at Canterbury on the second day that I was there, the Tuesday. And he was, I have to say, he came and he limped into the room with his, at that time, quite long, kind of curly hair, slightly kind of King Charles, bit shorter, and a Mrs. Kelly knitted jumper was immediately the most interesting thing at that moment in the room. So he had a presence, and I mean he changed our lives. He changed my life, but we actually changed his life by laughing at his jokes. He was and he realised he was an entertainer. He was married to a absolutely wonderful painter called Elizabeth Rathmore, and she was a watercolour painter mainly, but she also made oil paintings. And he recognised that he would never be quite as good at painting. Cosmo Vinyl, who'd managed him when he was in the Blockheads 10 years later, perceptively said he was good enough to know that he wasn't good enough. I mean, at painting, but he realised he was just good with words. He was a writer, and I mean, not a very good singer, but that's what he wanted to do. And he gathered a few of us together who played instruments. I mean, I was unwittingly called into. We had to do our first gig was to support Shakin' Stevens and the Sunsets at the Art School dance in Canterbury, and we were bad.
It's all been downhill since then, Humphrey, really?
We were just not bad enough, and Ian got the scent and sort of carried on. But he taught me, and still does. I mean, he's been dead for 25 years, but I still. He's standing there behind me when I'm drawing some chicken. Well, this actually happened. I mean, I was drawing some chicken wire, and he came up and he said, "Think about the person who designed that chicken wire. Imagine if they were standing where I'm standing, just there." And you go, and then you look at it. So, that in the engagement in the sort of tiny things really began with him.
But the music was for you a diversion. It was not really, it was not a direction you were ever going to go into. It was sort of accidental.
It was accidental, and I think I went into it slightly romantic. Could play guitar, but he eventually ended up playing bass, and thought I might get the girl, but by the time I'd done the thing and then packed up the gear, and all the girls had gone home. So it was, and then the girl that I did marry, who is in this room, hated rock and roll. I mean, when she heard that I'd been involved in it later on, that was nearly it. And I agreed with her, so that's why we still get on.
Before we tickle.
No, I was ambitious for painting, which I was very bad at, but I was quite a good bass player. Now, actually, I'm just going to add something. There's been a lovely thing has happened here. I mean, you'll be in the newspapers all the time, but this exhibition twice, this exhibition here at Gainsborough's house, as it were, out here, in the middle of nowhere, actually in the epicenter of things, is my opinion. Jonathan Jones made it Exhibition of the Week, not once, but twice, and cited that an ex-bass player, Kilburn the High Roads, poetic views of buildings, where the word poetic I hung on to. And 50 years ago, I'd have been mortified, really. I thought I'm a painter, and I'm not an associated rock and roll. I don't like that musical connection or whatever. But I do think that, in a funny sort of way, I mean, I feel more of a Kilburn now than I felt when I was in Kilburn High Road. Kilburn High Road was a club, really, of disparate minds and what have you. And I mean, more than a sort of group, as it were. We were ambitious to be unlike anyone else in the world and that kind of thing. But the bit I didn't like was the playing the music. But I'm still a Kilburn, and I'm painting. My painting is almost caught up with my bass playing, and I think of bass playing as, I think one of the things I can do about two things. One of them is I can colour match, but so can the man in the Ford factory in the colour department. He's good at matching colours, And I've got a little bit of rhythm. I don't know where it's from, but, and I think in a funny sort of way it comes out in the picture. Is that overwriting?
No, I think it absolutely does.
Anyway, so I think there is a connection. I think it's legitimate, as it were, that, I mean, I'm quite glad that I've got something in my life of which I don't have to be ashamed of anymore.
Before we move on from music, forgive me for asking, but yeah, I'd like to know, and I'm sure people here would be interested to know something about the collaboration with Paul McCartney. You told me in the 1970s, and on the kind of music theme. How did that come about?
Well, I again hit note after I'd done the 10cc cover. McCartney was in a group called Wings. They were doing a record cover for him, and they asked me to do a drawing for the inside cover, not the cover, so you didn't see it unless you bought the album. And they were about to go on tour in America, and Linda McCartney rang me up. Of course, I thought it was somebody pulling my leg, but she said, no. She said, we'd like you to come. We've seen your drawing, so we're going on tour. We're going to have film, TV, radio, everything. She came from a high art, haute art background in America. Her father was best friends with de Kooning. They knew Rothko, etc., etc. They were very part of abstract expression. And she really knew about art. And I mean, when McCartney married her, the Beatles knew about art. I mean, their record covers weren't, as it were, they weren't like Blue Note record covers. They weren't self-conscious. They were just good and memorable, and it's because they knew what they were doing. And he sort of married up when he married Lind. He married into something that he was going towards. And she just said, I want you to come on this tour, 2.5 months. I said, you don't have to paint us. You don't have to paint anything. You don't have to do anything. He said, you just come and see how it works out, which was a lovely thing. So I went and did that. And then I sort of worked for about a year after that doing paintings of those. And then we did a book about a few years later. Then I did 30 years later, I was working in Long Island printing with Maurice Payne, and McCartney has a house nearby, and we just bumped into him in a cafe one day, and he came to the studio and saw one of my chairs and an etching of a chair. What turns out apparently is a Chippendale chair, but it was my one was one you get off the back of Titbits or whatever for £99. and 2 years later, he rang up and said, "I'd like to use that on the cover," which is the way that being commissioned is a difficult. I can do commissions, but you have to. It can be quite a pressure doing commission. This was a work that already existed, so I wasn't having to gainsay, and he liked it. I liked the fact that he'd remembered it, because I think that image to me is kind of king, queen, whatever. So that was very nice. That incidentally, I had about 10 years before that been asked to do some artwork for the Beatles anthology, which they did in the middle of the 90s. And in the end, Klaus Vormann, who did Revolver, did it. But the person at Apple who was commissioning that said, we want a sort of history of the Beatles, in a picture. And I must say, I thought, you don't really need to explain that. And I told Paul afterwards, I said, if you put a candle on the front, people will buy the record, it's absolutely fine. So anyway, he put my chair on it. Anyway, I've nearly finished. Last year, he asked me to do paintings of Wings because I'd been on tour with Wings, and they were doing a box set. Wings went on for 10 years. There were 10 records. There were 10 members of Wings. So I did a little, I did paintings of each one, as it were. And that was quite tricky because I had to pretend they were still alive, because some of them weren't, and they had to appear as if they'd just come into the studio and I'd made a painting of it. Painting's not as easy as it looks, man. Anyway.
I want to return to, partly back to South London and in a sense, subject matter, the urban fabric. And there's a lovely quote from Rafi's film, where I think it's from a James Joyce remark, I believe. There's no such thing as an uninteresting person, and you say the same about buildings. So yeah, can you tell us something about your attraction to kind of post-war architecture and what you see there?
Well, mainly post. I mean, we live in a very beautiful Victorian house with cornice around. It's lovely, but I simply don't understand it. It was built for people in top hats and frock coats and button-back chairs. It's not fit for purpose. Now, I. In fact, the only bit that I recognised what we did was a sort of very ordinary, typical middle-class thing. Was we put the front room and the back room, we knocked a big hole in so that they come together, and there's a beam across, and that sort of brutalist beam is what I recognise because it's part of me. So the buildings that mean most to me, for want of a better word, that I understand, were built since 1951, which is when I was born. Because I can remember Macmillan, I can remember Wilson, I can remember Tony Blair. I know that I recognise the thinking, and how everything occurs is because it's a reaction against what's happened before. We want to make a new world for ourselves. And so every stage just for, you mentioned, architecture, so let's keep it at that. I hesitate to talk about architecture when there's an architect that I know in the room, Chris Dyson. But it's, when I did one of the other quote in the film that I recognise, when I said about double glazing, it just shows how vulnerable buildings are. When buildings are vulnerable, to us. When I paint a picture, people don't tend to come along and sort of add things into it. If you make a building, people move in. I recognise this as a neighbour of my sister who was an architect, and I discovered that he had a house in Pevsner. And I said, "Oh, Martin, built in 1948 in near Hampstead." I said, "That's he's a very grumpy man, is." I said, "Oh, that's lovely that you've got this here." "Well, it's not my house anymore. They've changed the curtains, they've moved the staircase, And I just thought, oh God, it must be awful. That, as it were. But people put, you sort of read a building, you can see why people have done this or that or whatever. I go to Lincolnshire, I have summer holidays, a great friend in Scunthorpe, and you drive through Lincolnshire, and the beautiful Georgian houses, nearly all of the farmhouses. Excuse me. God, that's frightened your life. They've all got double glazing windows. Why? Because across the German Ocean, known to you as the North Sea, across the Russian steppes, the east winds come across. You've got to have the best technology you can to keep the cold out. A lot of people, the chattering classes in Islington will say, "Oh, those aren't very beautiful, they're not original," or what. No, they keep that they are fit for purpose now. So it just goes on and on. When I see buildings, I just sort of get interested in all sorts of absurd, minutiae or whatever. And
that was picked up in the film again. Your observation, which seems obvious once you've said it, but again, that sort of post-war aesthetic of horizontal windows and not portrait windows. Something kind of, one could just go through life not observing such things. But you have a habit of picking up on these features. And I know when I came to the studio, I kind of knew we were going to get on when you started talking about breeze blocks. Like, oh, here's somebody I could talk to at great length, and you were forthcoming on the history of breeze blocks. And lo and behold, we have one of your paintings in the exhibition that honours the humble breeze block. But it's these sort of observations which you can kind of isolate from the busyness of modern life, which I think is really, really fascinating and kind of perceptive.
Well, the horizontal window, I think, comes down from the Bauhaus. I think it may have started a little bit earlier than that, but extraordinary, a country that we fought not once, which would have been, I can't remember the quote, twice, which was foolish. Germany, who is the fount of 20th century design, produced this little art school called the Bauhaus, which had such influence. Again, don't get me started about the Gropius building in outside Cambridge, Impington College, that I propose determined post-war architecture in England right up until the 1970s. And those are that's kind of sub-Bauhaus building, what we think of as 50s and 60s. I don't know if anyone's been to Impington College, but it looks like a 50s school building.
Does,
You have, with sort of blue panels. And it was built in 1936 by Gropius, who landed here when he was escaping Germany, but he then went off and to New York and did the Pan Am building. So again, it's by the time it's come down to quite a lot of the buildings, and through town planning and what have you, probably the memory of the Bauhaus has disappeared, but it's somehow just sort of seeped in, comes up through, the shoes and through the knees and into the brain, and we just sort of think, oh, of course, yes, we'll build a window like that, which is, parallel to the ground that we're standing on and what we're looking at.
And landscape format. And sticking with landscape, we're going to go to questions in a moment. I can't see Charlie at the moment, but we're kind of almost ready for questions, aren't we? But I did want to just ask you about cars, because cars feature in your paintings. And I remember you saying something to me about how you found viewing landscape through the car windscreen had been important to you or was important to you. So what is it about cars, and can you say something about that particular viewpoint?
Well, I most of us think of screens and laptops and computers and what have you. Everyone talks about living through. I've been seeing the world through a screen since 1951. Just because one can sit in this absurd sitting room listening to music and, in the old days, lighting a cigarette, whistling at 60 miles an hour so there's no wind and what have you. I mean, cars are absurd. They're lethal weapons. But we now can't do without them. I well remember standing in the airport, the Newark Airport, New York, and there was a wall of in Hudson News. There was a wall of self-help books: how to have better orgasm, how to get on with this, how to trick a deal with, what have you. And I looking at it, and I thought, those are there because of where we are. We're about to get on an aeroplane that'll, in 5 hours' time, I'll be in England. We are a car-crunched, aeroplane, travel-crunched, car-crunched nation, world. And it affects our thinking. I'm not a great rambler or anything, but if you have a problem, mostly you can solve it by walking around the block a couple of times and you'll sort of, something will occur to you. But no, there's this whole library of, how to do this, how to do that. Is because we've been so affected by the car. Mm-hmm. And, we're in denial about it and we hate BP and everything like that. Take a person's car away, they were not happy about it. So I present it in a sort of a way, in the same way that Warhol presented his electric chair. It's that, get over it. Well, actually, don't get over it. Think about it. Mm-hmm. But it's not, I don't want to deny it. I mean, the fact that, I came from London this morning. If I'd come, 150 years ago from London, I'd have been late if I started out this morning. So
we're very glad you're here, Humphrey. But I think we're going to go to...
I'm very glad to be here, by the way. That's it. Thank you. And I'm so glad you all came. Thank you very, very much.
And if
indeed.
You don't mind, I'm going to invite some questions. Is that okay?
Well, if you're all right with it.
Yes, I think it would be interesting to hear. So does anybody... Oh, there's a roving mic. I can see Charlie's going to come and find you. But if you have a question... Oh, Chris Dyson, aforementioned architect, has the first question. Chris.
Hi. That was a wonderful talk, very charming and inspiring. It reminded me of some moments of my own childhood where I grew up in Bramhope in Leeds, outside Leeds, in a 1930s house with horizontal windows. And it was my mum and dad's first house together. It was a semi-detached, and it was I can vividly remember growing up and enjoying that place with great joy. Had a garden, and it was a place where we'd learn to cycle, and all of those things. And I see in your work a great joy for the ordinary, the suburban, but also urban as well. But those places, as you say, in between. But forgive me, I'm rambling a bit as well. But I think it's one of those things that I find very intriguing as an architect, in that we are in a place in architecture where it doesn't have to be spectacular. It can be ordinary. And I think that's something we embrace as architects. And there is joy there. So my question is, sorry, is to you is how do you see that movement of architecture and how that might impact your work in the future as well as an artist?
I don't use the word joy. At least I can't keep it at that level all the time. I mean, what I just can't help where I am, and I'm. It's reportage, really. I'm sort of reporting from a front line, where not much is happening, and not many people reading what I file. That's it. I went to. Again, I can remember Charlie Gillett, our manager in Kilburn, the High Road, saying to Ian, "Why are you singing in an American accent?" And I said, it's because we all turned our prayer mats to America, for 20 years. And we thought that was right. No, be English. The Beatles sang in English, which was interesting. And so I, began to think, well, this is where we are. I went to Brazil in 1988, and this was a sort of epiphany moment with my friend, dear late friend, now dead friend, Steve Nugent, anthropologist. And we were there for a month. And I really, I just got excited. Bus tickets, the buses, the design, the everything, the music, the streets, the tiled houses and everything. And there was kind of adrenaline happened. And I think you might recognise that, something when you go abroad and you do see something done, that is perfectly ordinary, but in a foreign accent, and it makes you very excited. And I thought, why aren't I like this when I'm in the Forest Hill Road? Why don't I hang on to the bus tickets and what have you? So I began to know, and it's really where, now I did bring a prop, which is the same, the book that Raffi showed in his film. This is my fifth dot book, and did somebody ask where the first one was? In the British Museum is the answer. Sorry, that is a boast moment. And these are, as I say, these are the in between and boring moments. But there's sometimes. Well, I'm repeating what I said in the film. Is that sometimes you have big ideas, but you have to, as a artist, you have to sort of carry on.
I think that is that sense.
It's a way of carrying on, as it were. And I wanted it to look like a published book. So I did it in ink. So I call it Usain Bolt after the gun's gone off, not training. It's not like a sketchbook. That's it. I'm on doing the 100 meters. Yeah.
I always imagine this, picking up on Chris's point about, you are the great observer of what one perceives to be uninteresting or unobserved. And I can imagine if you were commissioned to paint, say, Buckingham Palace, you'd probably end up walking around the corner to the back and paint the so-called uninteresting perspective.
But can I just interrupt there? I did go to Buckingham Palace, the garden party. Round the back, they've got there was a 1970s Rolls Royce, and in it was a Bang & Olufsen sound system with 8-track. Now, probably nobody remembers 8-track, whatever, but they still had it, and it reminded me of a friend of mine who I was at art school with, who became a gilder and whatever, and he was working at Windsor Castle, and he said, today I've been working in the Queen's bedroom, and we said, pray tell, and he said, 3-bar fire, pink candlewick bed spray, whatever. So there's something about that, that wonderful ordinariness of Her Majesty, in her bedroom. So I think I've come full circle.
You've linked that beautifully. Yes. Very much. Another question. One more question. One here.
The car right at the very end. Gallery. With the painting, and the paintwork ball goes like that. do you turn your painting to make the paint swoop at the bottom, or do you deliberately paint all those terms?
I don't think if I deliberately paint anything. That's just really how they come out. I do a certain amount of my painting on the floor, and that's a sort of legacy of when I went to art school in 1969. I was surrounded by a sort of faux American abstract expressionists, because when you're at art school, you're taught by people who teach what they loved. So you're always about 20 years out of date. And they all painted on the floor and poured and sort of colour fields. So I was a little bit on my own because I was painting, on an easel. But, murder will out. And, I sort of picked up sometimes it is quite I need to have the painting a bit flat. And what have you is probably why. And then I pick it up or something. I go, oops, because everything ends up at the bottom of the painting. Yeah, all those sort of careful things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think sadly we're out of time. I'm getting the nod at the back of the room. Humphrey, thank you so much. It's been fascinating, and I think I'm certain we could have talked for much, much longer. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again for Rafi for allowing us to show your brilliant film, and thank you, everybody.